Inside a Manhattan courtroom, history stopped to watch. What unfolded wasn't just another legal proceeding. It was a collision between power and justice that no one saw coming. Former President Donald Trump, a man who spent decades dancing around legal consequences, finally hit a wall. And when that wall came down, it brought federal marshals with it. This is the story of what happened when a judge said, "Enough," and meant it. Let's cut through the noise. This trial, they're calling it the hush money case, is anything but simple. Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg has charged Trump with 34 felony counts. The allegation? Falsifying business records to cover up payments made during the 2016 election, payments meant to silence stories that could have changed everything. But here's where it gets complicated. Prosecutors aren't just talking about bad bookkeeping. They're arguing this was election interference dressed up as accounting errors, a conspiracy to deceive American voters before they ever cast their ballots. And at the center of it all, Michael Cohen, Trump's former fixer, his attorney, his confidant, and now his biggest threat. Cohen's already served time for lying to Congress. His credibility is shattered. But he's also the only person who can take us inside Trump's inner circle during those crucial months. The prosecution needs him. The defense wants to destroy him. And the entire case hinges on whether 12 jurors believe a convicted liar can finally tell the truth. Judge Juan Merchan knew this trial would be a powder keg, so he did what judges do in high-profile cases. He imposed a gag order. No public attacks on witnesses, no targeting court staff, no going after prosecutors or their families. Standard procedure, reasonable protection. But for Donald Trump, it might as well have been a challenge. The violations started almost immediately. Truth Social posts, rally speeches, cable news interviews, each one pushing the line, daring the judge to respond. Trump called Cohen a convicted liar and serial perjurer. He questioned the jury's impartiality, suggesting without evidence they were all Democrats. He went after Judge Merchan's daughter, highlighting her political consulting work to paint the entire trial as a partisan setup. This wasn't just about defending himself. This was strategic chaos. Prosecutors documented every violation, building their case piece by piece. 10 instances. 10 times Trump looked at that gag order and decided it didn't apply to him. The hearing was electric with tension. Prosecutor Christopher Conroy laid it out plainly. Trump's behavior was deliberate, calculated, an attempt to intimidate witnesses and poison the process. The defense fired back with the First Amendment. Todd Blanche argued his client was a presidential candidate being silenced during a campaign. Political speech, he insisted, is sacred. But Judge Merchan wasn't buying it. He found Trump in contempt on 9 of the 10 violations. The fine? $9,000. Pocket change for a billionaire. But then came the warning that mattered. Further violations will result in incarceration. The courtroom held its breath. A line had been drawn. Everyone knew Trump would cross it. Days later, he did. A cable news interview where he once again attacked the jury's integrity. A late-night rally where he called Judge Merchan highly conflicted and a tyrant. The prosecution returned to court. This time, they weren't asking for fines. They wanted jail time. The hearing that followed was unlike anything in American legal history. Conroy presented video clips, security threat reports, a pattern of willful, brazen defiance. The defendant, he said, is daring this court to act. He believes himself to be above the law. Todd Blanche's response was desperate and honest. Incarcerating a former president would be unprecedented. It's dangerous. It could ignite civil unrest. There was an argument that acknowledged what everyone in that room knew. This defendant wasn't just any defendant. But should that matter, Judge Merchan took 2 days to decide when Trump walked into court that morning. Something was different. His usual bravado dimmed. Judge Merchan took the bench and spoke with surgical precision. He reviewed each violation methodically, and then he delivered his conclusion. The defendant has again and flagrantly violated this court's lawful orders. The fines have proven useless. The threat to this court's integrity demands action. Then came the words that changed everything. The defendant is hereby held in criminal contempt. The room gasped. But Mershon wasn't finished. Given the demonstrable risk the defendant's words pose to officers of this court and the integrity of these proceedings, supplemental security measures are immediately necessary. He turned to the court clerk. Liaise with the United States Marshals Service for supplemental security and enforcement support, the US Marshals. That's when everyone understood this had just gone federal. The US Marshals aren't just courthouse security, they're the enforcement arm of the federal judiciary. They hunt fugitives, protect witnesses, and when called upon, they secure courtrooms against any threat. Their involvement transformed the scene instantly. Marshals in tactical gear coordinated with New York court officers, security perimeters tightened around the courthouse, transport protocols were discussed, holding facilities were considered. And then there was the complication no one wanted to talk about, Trump's Secret Service detail. 2 federal agencies, 2 different mandates, 1 former president. The potential for a jurisdictional nightmare was real. What happens if the judge orders Trump into custody, even briefly? Who has authority? The Marshals enforcing a court order, or the Secret Service protecting their protectee? These conversations were happening behind closed doors. Unprecedented, historic, terrifying. The political reaction was instantaneous and volcanic. Trump's campaign called it the darkest day in American history. House Republicans vowed investigations into the weaponization of justice. Speaker Mike Johnson framed it as persecution. Campaign donations surged within the hour. Democrats and legal analysts took a different tone. No one is above the law. The contempt ruling was necessary. Judicial independence had to be defended, but the damage was done. The nation's perception split completely. One side saw justice finally catching up with power. The other saw tyranny targeting their champion. Internationally, adversaries celebrated. Russian and Chinese state media broadcast the chaos as proof of American decline. Russian allies watched with horror and fascination, wondering if the United States could hold itself together in an election year. From Ukraine to Taiwan, America's domestic drama became a global security concern. The next day, everything was different. Federal marshals stood at the doors. The atmosphere was heavy, intimidating. When Michael Cohen took the stand, the stakes felt even higher. His testimony was detailed and damning. He walked through the hush money payments, the reimbursements, the falsified invoices, but he also gave the defense everything they needed, admitting his past lies, his personal vendetta against Trump. Todd Blanche's cross-examination was brutal. You want to see President Trump go to jail, don't you, Mr. Press? Cohen, struggling to stay composed, admitted he did. The jury absorbed every word of the tense exchange. Throughout it all, Trump sat at the defense table, shaking his head, whispering to lawyers, glaring at his former fixer. The Marshals watched his every move. This trial stopped being about hush money a long time ago. It became a stress test of American democracy. A live experiment to see if institutions built in quieter times can survive the modern era of polarization and post-truth politics. Legal scholars debated the unthinkable. Should the judge actually jail Trump for contempt? Most agreed it would be a nuclear option fraught with logistical and political peril. But a growing number argued that if violations continued, the judge would have no choice. To do otherwise would make the court's authority meaningless. The principle of equal justice demanded it. Meanwhile, Trump used the imagery to his advantage. Leaving court each day with marshals visible behind him, he framed himself as a dissident under guard. If they can do this to me, he warned supporters, they can do it to you. Judicial action fueled political grievance. Political grievance risked further judicial action. The feedback loop was complete. As the trial moves toward closing arguments, one date looms larger than the verdict itself: the contempt sentencing hearing. Scheduled for just weeks before the Republican National Convention, Judge Mershon will decide whether the contempt findings require incarceration. The timing couldn't be more explosive. The legal timeline and the electoral timeline are on a collision course, and the jury, sequestered from the media storm as much as possible, they remain the great unknown. What did they make of the marshals, the tension, the historic weight pressing down on that courtroom? Judges instruct juries to decide solely on evidence, but jurors are human. Their verdict will write one chapter of this story. But the larger question remains unanswered. This is more than a criminal trial. It's a fundamental test. In a nation of laws, what happens when someone with millions of loyal followers decides the law doesn't apply to them? The courtroom showdown laid bare a question America must answer. Can our democratic guardrails hold under this kind of pressure? The contempt ruling, the calling of the marshals, these weren't the climax. They were an escalation in a story with no clear ending. The answer is still being written, gavel strike by tense gavel strike.